And the gang members had to come once to this program. And so they asked me to evaluate it. And so I sat down with the woman. It was a contract, right? They contracted with this woman. She provided services. So I sit down with her, and I said, how long's your program? And she said, 12 weeks. I said, all right, 3 months. That's not real long, but okay. I said, how often do you meet with them? She said, once a week. I said, how long do you meet with them? She said, a half an hour. Guess what? It's not a 12-week program. It's a 6-hour program. You really think you're going to change the behavior of high-risk gang members in 6 hours? And you know who told me? The PO said, this is a joke. They said, we're chasing these kids all over town, and the judge thinks he's got some treatment program going here. It was like a gang meeting. They'd come in once a week. They'd have a gang meeting. Right? So the question is, how much? Here's the rules of thumb. For a moderate risk kid, 100 hours. And I'm talking about evidence-based programming. I'm talking about working with those youth on reducing their risk, teaching them new skills, changing their thinking. 100 hours gets the effect. Goes up a little bit if you give them a lot more treatment, but not that much. But for high risk, 200 plus. You've got to double it. And look at this finding. 100 hours for high risk will have little, if any, effect. A lot of good programs, in my opinion, have probably not been doing as well as they could. Not because they're not doing the right thing. They're just not giving the right dosage. We recently designed some programs in Ohio for revocators, parole revocators, kids. These were kids that came out of our institutions and got sent back. So we know they're pretty high risk, right? I mean, they already failed. They weren't out a month and most of them failed. And so the state said to me, design a program for them. They can only have them for 100 days, 110 days. We want them out pretty quick. So I told my staff, I don't want them failing because they don't get enough of the treatment. So we designed a program so that they get about 200, 220 hours. That's not easy. They go to school 5.5 hours a day. They got to have recreation. They got to eat, right? So we had to design, we do groups every day. They do groups. And on weekends, JCOs run groups. And we told the kids, you're not getting out until you complete the dosage of treatment and you learn the skills. You know what the kids told us? When do they start? We cut recidivism almost in half tracking those kids. And our behavioral indicators went way down. Those kids were behaving a lot better in the institution. Because if they didn't, they got thrown out and put in the general population. So I'm just telling you, think about your dosage of treatment. 200 hours, and it doesn't include work and school and other activities. We're talking about, and people say to me, well, that's hard to do. How do we do that? Well, you're going to have to be creative. I was up in Lansing, Michigan, and they had a day reporting center for kids. 5-day-a-week program. Kids came right in, they bus them in, they bring them in 4 o'clock. They were there from 4 to 8 every night. And they do an hour and a half a group, they eat, they do some recreation, and they do more group. Here's how they did it. Moderate risk kids came Tuesday and Thursday, and high risk kids came Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So they did 2 things. They separated moderate and high risk, and they gave the high risk a higher dosage of treatment. So that's how they got creative in doing that. Third part of the risk principle is intensive treatment for low-risk youth will often increase failure rates. Why? Well, 2 reasons. Low-risk youth will learn antisocial behavior from higher-risk youth. It doesn't work the other way around. It does not work the other way around. Studies have shown even the best treatment facilitator cannot negate the antisocial reinforcement that high-risk kids give off. They don't even have to talk, and they give it off. And you know, here's always my standard. Would you put your kid in with a bunch of high-risk delinquents? No. We would never do that as a parent. We do it all the time in our business, right? We're going to teach a kid a lesson. We put them in detention for 2 weeks. For some, the kid's some low-risk kid, we put them in. Who are we putting them in with? High-risk kids. So, I think we don't do it. We do it often. Okay? The other reason that we see this effect is because when you put low-risk kids into these intensive interventions, you're disrupting what makes them low risk. And I'll just take you as an example. You're all low risk. You're all low. The reason you're low risk, by the way, even if you got in trouble, if you got assessed, you score low risk. Why? You don't have criminal histories, you're employed, you're educated, you have families, right? You don't have those attributes. But let's say you got in some trouble right now, and I took you and put you in a correctional treatment facility for 6 months. How many of you would lose your jobs? How many of your families would have difficulty getting by without you for 6 months? How many of your neighbors would have a welcome home from the correctional treatment facility reception for you when you got out, right? They'd have a sign out there, all right. That would say that. Okay? And by the way, you send a kid to detention for a couple weeks who's low risk. Hey, do you want your kid hanging around with them when they get out? Do the teachers all know where he's been? That's what happens. You disrupt those attributes. That's what we think. We saw that very clearly in Ohio in some data. We did a big study, 14,000 kids, and this is what we found. Low-risk kids in the community had an 8% recidivism rate. When we put those kids in residential programs in Ohio, we more than doubled their recidivism rates. Moderate-risk kids, when we put them in institutions, we doubled their recidivism rates. It wasn't until you got down here at the very high-risk group that you actually saw positive effects from putting kids in residential and institutional programs, because they needed the structure. They did not do well for the community. All right, how am I doing? My third lesson is everybody thinks they're an expert. Right? That's the first thing I learned in criminal behavior. I don't mean you are experts. You work with delinquents all the time. But how many of you have been told by your family or friends what you ought to be doing to fix these kids? Right? Unsolicited advice, right? You get this, right? I'm sure they tell you how to take care of them and straighten them out. And that's a lesson I learned. I learned this lesson a number of years ago. I was flying to Boise, Idaho, and I was seated next to this elderly woman. She was one of these chatty types, and wouldn't take a hint. And she asked me what I did for a living, and I made the mistake of telling her. For 4 hours, she told me how to solve the crime problem. Didn't get off at Salt Lake, stayed right on with me to Boise. Now I just tell them I'm a proctologist. They leave me alone. These are the major risk and need factors. And I'm sure you're well familiar with these. You use the YASI, it gives you all this information. But this is antisocial, pro-criminal attitudes, values, beliefs, and cognitive emotional states. Cognitive emotional states are things like rage, and anger, and defiance, and identity, right? If you see yourself as a street thug, how are you going to act? Right? And anger, we've all, right? We've experienced it. You ever been cut off on the freeway? Somebody, you're going to go after them. You're madder than hell. That's not how you normally think. You're in a cognitive emotional state. Attitudes, values, and beliefs. How do you see the world? Do you blame others? Do you accept responsibility? Okay. Or do you think everybody does it? I got caught. I'm unlucky. Cops are out to get me. Okay. I beat him up. I've been beat up worse. I interviewed a parolee the other day, and I said to the guy, I said, "Are you working?" He said, "No, I quit my job." I said, "Why?" He said, "I wasn't getting enough hours." I said to him, "How many are you getting now?" He said, "None." I said, "You're kind of moving backwards, right? Most of us don't quit a job till we got another job lined up." Not him, he showed them. That kind of thinking, right? What do kids say? School's not for me. I've never been good at school. Teachers don't like me, right? And you think that's low self-esteem. What they're really saying is, who the hell wants to go? Right? And you hear it, I make more money in a day than you make in a month. What do we do with those kids? We educate them.